This is a weird story. Can I say that? Am I allowed to say that? Can we just admit it's odd? This is the kind of story I read and I think, really? This is right up there for me with the talking donkey and the fish with a penchant for Hebrew prophet. And this is, to me at least, this is the kind of story I read and I think, seriously, you expect me to believe that. But not only do I believe this story is true, but on top of that, I believe that this story is actually genius-level stuff. Now, to make sense of the oddness of the story, first, a bit of background. This story takes place in a region called the Decapolis on the southeastern side of the Sea of Galilee. Decapolis is a Greek word meaning 10 cities. It was a federation of cities, first colonized by Alexander the Great, and then the century before Jesus, it was conquered by the Roman Empire. Now, whenever the Roman legions marched in, they crushed any and all resistance. A few people came out on top, tax collectors, Roman citizens, local politicians, call girls. But for the most part, people, Jew and Gentile, hated the empire with a vengeance. To the Jews, Rome was evil incarnate. It was the embodiment of a dark power. They believed at the back of the empire, behind Caesar Nero and the legion after legion after legion, behind all of the propaganda of Pax Romana, and at the root of all the violence and injustice was a mysterious and enigmatic, but evil and sadistic personified force. In the book of Daniel, how many of you have read that book before? Don't read it before you go to bed at night. It's a crazy, intense, apocalyptic, hyper-political book written not that long before Jesus, and it was popular around the time of Jesus and also the time of Mark. Now, in the book of Daniel, there's this vision of 4 beasts coming up out of the sea. Remember from last week that the sea in the ancient world was symbolic for evil and chaos and the demonic powers raging against the Creator God. And the beasts were symbolic for 4 empires coming up out of the sea to devour the world whole. First was the Babylonian Empire a few hundred years before Jesus, then the Medo-Persian Empire, then Alexander the Great, also known as Colin Farrell, and the Greeks, and then the Roman Empire, finally. And the empire was the final climax in a series of world orders. And there was nothing that Jews and quite a few Gentiles wanted more than to see this empire, this beast, this nation of pigs pushed back into the sea once and for all and drowned. Now, with all of that in your mind, let's work through the story sentence by sentence. Don't tune out. I know you're thinking, we already read the story. Can't we just skip to the end, the part that's about me? Stay with me. This is called exegesis, which is a Greek word meaning out of. And we do this every single week where we piece the text apart and examine every nook and cranny, and we put it all back together. We do this not because we're pedantic or OCD. Actually, I am technically, but both of those that's a whole other sermon. But we do this because we love this book, and more than anything, we love its author, and we want to know exactly what he is saying to you and me. But we believe it was first written to them. So let's dig into that and then think about you in about an hour. Here we go. Opening line, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. So remember that Jesus is crossing over from Jewish territory to Gentile territory. He's unleashing the kingdom of God not only on Israel, but over the entire planet. There is no corner of the earth that is immune to Jesus' healing and life-giving rule. But there is an anti-kingdom, what later New Testament authors called the dominion of darkness. And it's not happy at all about Jesus' expansion outside the borders of Israel. Jesus faces resistance the second that he starts to go to the other side. First on the sea in a dangerous storm, and then right on the other side with a sociopathic creature in a graveyard. And in both cases, the root evil isn't the storm or the beast-like creature that used to be a man. Rather, it's a dark power. And this story should be read as Jesus' daring invasion of enemy-occupied territory. 2, when Jesus got out of the boat, right, set foot on Gentile territory, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Now, for those of you that are skeptical, that's fine, by the way. I have quite a bit of that in myself as well. But here's the deal. It's hard for you and I to believe in this kind of stuff, living in a society or in a worldview that is based on science, or more specifically, based on scientism. The idea that all that is real is what you can test and prod and poke in a laboratory. But in Jesus and the New Testament author's worldview, the universe is teeming with life. In between the creator God, being with no equal and no parallel, and the 7+ billion human beings on the planet, there is an invisible world filled with real spiritual beings. What you and I, for the most part, call angels and demons, but there's a variety of names for these real spiritual beings in the scriptures. Angels, demons, spirits, powers, principalities, rulers, lords. In the early Hebrew scriptures, they're actually called Elohim, or what I call gods with a lowercase g. And some of these real spiritual beings, or demons, or spirits, are in league with Yahweh, the Creator, and His Son, Jesus, and working to usher in God's kingdom or God's rule over the earth. But others are flat out at war with Yahweh and in rebellion against Jesus and His kingdom, and all wreaking havoc all over the place. Now, this man, quote, with an impure spirit, is demonized, meaning he's under the control and influence of an impure spirit, a being, a real spiritual being at war with God and His Son, Jesus. Now, keep reading. 3, this man lived in the tombs, in the graveyard, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he'd often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart, broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and then cut himself with stones. Okay, what an eerie scene. I mean, I read this and I think Blair Witch Project, for those of you that were around in the late 90s or whenever that was. I mean, it's eerie. It's probably in the middle of the night because Jesus left the other side of the lake as it was getting dark, and it's just a few miles across. It's in a graveyard, which Jews thought of as a haunt for demonic spirits, and it's with a beast-like creature. That word subdue in my text in the NIV is demazo in Greek, and it's better translated tame. It's a word used for animals. You don't tame men or women. You tame a horse or you tame a brute beast. And this man is like that, wild and untamed. And somehow in this domicile for demonic spirits, the man had been caught up with this darkness, sucked into it, and overcome by it. Notice the signs of demonization. First, he's in isolation, all alone in a graveyard, shut off from society as a whole. Bondage, he's under the power, under the control, under the influence, no free will, no capacity to break free. Sadism, he's in a graveyard, there's an obsession with death. Mental illness, he's not right, not in his right mind. Superhuman strength, which is clearly a sign that I am not demonized. He's naked, we find out later. I mean, no clothing on, and he's cutting himself. Man, it's crazy. Here we are thousands of years later, and that problem is more acute than ever before. Cutting can be a form of self-punishment. You know, I'm bad. Or it can be an escape, a way to kind of break from the numbness of pain. What's that lyric? I bleed just to know I'm alive. Or it can be a desperate attempt to get attention from a mother or father or anybody. Or it can be, in this case, a sign of demonic control and influence over a man or a woman. But when this beast is face to face with Jesus, watch what happens. 6, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." The phrase, "what do you want with me," is a Semitic idiom. It can be translated, "why are you bothering me?" or "why do you interfere with me?" or "what's your business here?" It's kind of like he's saying, listen, you're not supposed to be here. You're Jewish. You're Israel's Messiah. This is Gentile territory. This is my turf. What? And your kingdom thing is for over there. This is my turf. What? And he's confused and upset and mad. And then he says, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Interesting language. The pagans use that epithet for the chief god in the Greco-Roman pantheon, and the Jews use that to distinguish Yahweh, the creator, from all the other so-called gods. And this whole thing, Jesus, Son of the Most High God, is not worship by any stretch of the imagination. This was a ploy in an ancient exorcism. It was thought that if you called out your enemy by name, you had the advantage over him or her. And he does that, but then he says, don't torture me. He's scared to death. Don't think of this as a wrestling match between Jesus and the man or the impure spirit. Like there's no contest here. He knows what is about to go down. And then 9, Jesus asked them, what is your name? My name is Legion. That one goes out to Ben Peterson at the soundboard. My name is Legion. I have such a wussy, musician voice. I need, a man voice there. My name is Legion. Why are we laughing at that? It's the darkest moment in the story. He replied, for we are many. That was awesome. This is my first sermon of the day. That was just yes, so the Holy Spirit is here, and yes. Wait, no, that was not the Holy Spirit, just to clarify. A legion was the largest Roman military unit, upwards of 6,000 soldiers, known for brutality and destruction. This man is demonized not just by one impure spirit, but in the text language, by many. And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. As far as we can tell, demonic spirits have power and authority over a specific geographic region. Put another way, just like you and me, sure, they can wander and travel and move around, but they live somewhere. That's why sometimes when you drive into a certain part of town or onto a certain street, or you walk into a certain home or into a park or a forest or a jungle, or you fill in the blank, all of a sudden in an eerie way you feel something invisible but real, because it's there and it's home. And this legion does not want to move out of town. 11, a large herd of pigs, random, was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. The spirits are like a parasite in need of a host. And a human host is by far the best, but they see a herd of pigs and opt for plan B, right? And here's what's crazy to me, 13. He gave them permission. Okay, sure, go ahead. And the impure spirits came out of the man and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Now, it's not clear in the text at all who killed the pigs. All right, you have 3 options. Option A, Jesus somehow made the pigs run into the lake, right? And Jesus killed the pigs, and in doing so, the demons, or the spirits. Could be, but it doesn't say that at all. It's nowhere there. Secondly, the spirits killed the pigs, but that doesn't make sense because they wanted to go into them to stay alive. Option C is that when the pigs were overcome by the spirits, it made them freak out. They did not have the capacity like a human being to handle that, and it made them break into a stampede and kamikaze into the lake. If this interpretation is right, and I think it's the most likely, then the very thing the spirits were trying to avoid happens. This would make the story ironic, which is an ancient form of humor, okay? This means that when you're in church or whatever in the first century and Mark's gospel was being read out loud, when you get to this part, you would hear snickering in the audience, if not full-on laughter. Oh yeah, the impure spirits are killed by pigs, by an impure animal. Either way, the point is that the spirits have been driven back where they belong, into the sea, into chaos and evil, back where they belong, and all by the power of Jesus the King and his inbreaking kingdom. Now, the story, interesting enough, is not over. 14. Those tending the pigs ran off, that's a bad day for him, and reported this in the town and countryside. Can you imagine? You're going to your boss. Well, it was odd. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there. So dozens, if not hundreds, who knows how many people come out. And there's the man, and I love this line, dressed and in his right mind. What a picture of Jesus at work. How many of you is like, gosh, that is my story? And they were afraid. I mean, scared to death. Whoa, 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 this Jesus is too dangerous, too disturbing. Those who had seen it told the people what happened about to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. I mean, it's crazy. The people as a whole reject Jesus. He's too much. He's too disturbing. He's too dangerous. Please, Jesus, please go. We don't want you here. And Jesus, interesting, says, okay, 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Please, Jesus, I'm begging you. But Jesus did not let him. It's interesting. This phrase with him is used by Mark for the disciples a few chapters before. Basically, this man is saying, Jesus, I want to be your disciple. I want to follow you 24/7. And Jesus' invitation was, anyone, come follow me, come be my disciple. You would think he would say, absolutely, get in the boat, you're on. But instead, Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord, Kyrios in Greek, meaning Yahweh or God, has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. I love that. Go tell people what Yahweh, the Creator, has done for you. Hey, everybody, this is what Jesus has done for me. Because in Mark, the writer's mind and imagination, when Jesus acts, God acts because the two are in concert. The two are one and the same. Jesus had done for him, and all the people, closing line, were amazed. Word is out all over the Decapolis, and people are blown away. Now, this is a complex story because Jesus is interacting with three characters. The spirit or spirits called Legion, and the people from the nearby town and surrounding area, and then the kind of sociopathic beast-like creature turned disciple of Jesus. Now let's take each one in turn. First off, Jesus and Legion. As weird as this story is, it starts to make sense when you read it in context. A number of scholars read it as political satire about the Roman Empire and the dark power behind it. Now stay with me for a minute or two. Here's why. Pigs in Mark's day were symbolic. I think of the world today. I say olive branch. You think what? Peace. I say dove. As a follower of Jesus, you think what? Holy Spirit, right? Well, in the same way, pigs were symbolic of paganism. We think of pigs as cute, right? Babe, Porky Pig, Miss Piggy. And then I think of the Portland obsession with bacon. What in the world? Not me. I follow Jesus. But to the Jews, pigs were like rats. I mean, pigs were nauseating, and they were symbolic for the pagan world as a whole, but Rome in particular. Rome was a nation of pigs, of swine, and Rome adopted that imagery with pride. In fact, the Roman legions stationed in Palestine, its emblem was a wild boar. On top of that, the story is filled with Roman military language. The word legion is the obvious one. The word herd wasn't used for pigs. There's no such thing. I'm not a farmer, but from what I'm told, there's no such thing as a herd of pigs. It was a word used for a band of new recruits to the army. The phrase go into them in 12 is sexual innuendo. And it was well known that wherever the Roman army would go, they would rape the women that they conquered. The phrase, he gave them permission, is more literally, and I think it's in the ESV, he dismissed them. They give a commander to the army, hey, you're dismissed. And then finally, that word rushed in the NIV, down the steep bank into the lake, is actually the Greek word charged, like an army charged down the steep bank and were drowned. So this is a story laden with imagery from the Roman military. So what is Mark, the author, what is Mark up to? Well, think of the man. On the surface, he's crazy, right? He's insane. He's not right. But in reality, behind the facade, the real problem is not insanity so much, it's an impure spirit. There can be no doubt that much, and I know I'm going to step on toes here, but much of what we call mental illness is in fact the demonic at work. Now note, and please listen to me, not all, but a chunk of it. We may rename the demonic as psychosis or chemical imbalance or schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder or a genetic predisposition to violence. But at the root of some of this, not all, but some of this, is a demonic power. When a suicide bomber kills innocent women and children, it's easy to think that a phantom power was behind that. When a serial killer does unspeakable things to a young girl, when 3 women are trapped for years upon years upon years in the basement of a house, it's hard to believe that kind of evil could come from a human being all alone. Now, we think, this is what's going on in the story, we think Mark is drawing a parallel between the man and the legion and the empire and the dark power animating it from under the surface. It's like Mark is saying the real problem isn't the man. If anything, he's the victim. The real problem is the legion behind him. And in the same way, the real problem isn't the empire. It's the dark power or powers at its core. There is no doubt in my mind that behind the oppressive nations of history and around the world today, there have been, and are demonic powers. I would not be at all surprised to learn that behind the genocide in Syria, the injustice in North Korea, the violence in the Congo, that there are malignant spiritual powers animating the leadership from the top down. But here's the point of the story. Mark is writing to followers of Jesus a few decades later, facing persecution from who? Rome. Nero, a Hitler-like figure. The empire, men and women who wanted nothing more than to see Rome, who had can you imagine if the state had murdered your wife, murdered your children, robbed you of your life, your job, your security, your safety, all of that, who wanted nothing more than to see Rome and all the legions in it pushed back into the sea and destroyed once and for all. They are craving freedom. But Jesus, rather than inciting a violent revolution, located the real enemy as the demonic powers at the back of the empire. Never does he take Rome on head to head. Even when he is crucified by the empire, it's like he sees past the facade, past the soldier who is nailing Jesus to the cross, and sees the real evil lurking in the shadows, and he deals with that. All that to say, in the words of the later writer Paul, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers, all names for real spiritual beings of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Make sure that you locate the enemy in the right place. Otherwise, here's the problem. We end up fighting people that we should be saving. And this, my friends, is fast becoming an American pastime for the church. We end up fighting. The man here, does Jesus lay into the man? You idiot, you, but no. We end up fighting people that we should be saving. Make sure that you don't get sucked in to the Western worldview. It says all that's real is what you can see and touch and taste and poke and prod. There is an invisible but real world all around you. Make sure that you locate the enemy in the right place and implement Jesus' power over anything and everything. Now, secondly, moving on. Jesus and the people, one of the things that's easy to miss in the story is the effect that the loss of 2,000 pigs would have had on the local economy. Seriously. I mean, even by today's standards, 2,000 pigs is a lot of bacon. I mean, a lot of money. I mean, even by today's standards. In 30 AD or so, it would have been, true story, an economic meltdown for the region. So basically, because of money, the people in the nearby town want nothing to do with Jesus. Please get out, go away. It's not, please, no, we don't want you here. You know, lots of people are fine with Jesus as long as he doesn't actually change anything. As long as he doesn't touch our money, right? As long as he doesn't touch our budget or our economy or our job or our lifestyle or our 5-year plan. But the problem is that Jesus is disturbing by nature. Next slide. We want Jesus as long as he doesn't mess with our lifestyle. Would you agree? We want Jesus the add-on, Jesus the life coach, Jesus the ticket to somewhere else when I die, Jesus the accessory to my ensemble. Sure, great. But that's not who Jesus is. He's dangerous. He's disturbing. He is an affront to the status quo. He will mess you up. Seriously. There's a reason that people reject Jesus. These people know exactly who Jesus is and exactly what Jesus is capable of and know all about Jesus' power, and who say no to Jesus. And the way that Mark works, you, the reader, and I are supposed to identify with characters in the story, right? You read about Peter and James and John scared to death on the storm. You're like, oh, dude, that is so me. Read about the man in the story demonized and then set free. You think, oh my gosh, his story is my story. Or you read about Jesus eating and drinking with people far from God, and you think, yeah, that's right. That's how I should live. I should eat. I should drink with. Listen, you do not want to identify with the people in this story. You do not want this to be you. And don't think that right now I'm talking to non-Christians, so to speak. I'm talking to myself right now. I'm fine with Jesus the teacher, but Jesus the Lord is scary and intimidating. It says the people were scared. It's the exact same word used with the disciples, the story before. Right after the storm, it says the disciples were terrified, or phobos in Greek, or scared to death. But the disciples hang on. The men and women here are terrified, scared to death, and say, it's too much. It's too much. No, we don't want anything to do with you. Listen, Jesus, don't make that mistake. Jesus will mess you up, but in doing so, he will set you free. And it's ironic at the end of the story, the man who was in bondage, that man is now in his right mind, end quote, but the people are crazy. Seriously, the people choose pigs over Jesus. Swine, money, economy, lifestyle, a way of life, however many cars in the driveway, over Jesus, the king, and his kingdom and his life-giving rule. That is the definition of insanity. So the crazy man isn't sane, and the sane people are crazy. It's ironic. Now, moving on, last thought, Jesus and the man. This animalistic sociopath turned follower of Jesus was not only set free, he was restored, made fully human all over again with a life, a family, a home, and a calling in life. If you are like the man, if you're here this morning, and you relate, you identify, you connect with a character or two in this story, and if you are like the man at the beginning of the story, under the power or influence of a demonic spirit, or maybe not that, but maybe of a force outside of yourself, or of a strange, inexplicable bondage. In America, we would call it an addiction or a genetic predisposition. But you're in bondage to a being, to a voice in your head, to a thought, to an inclination, to a substance, to a chemical, to a pattern, to a sin, to a way of speaking, to people you love. If you are under the control, under the influence, Jesus can set you free. And if your life has been wrecked, if your home is a graveyard, so to speak, if there's nothing left, and I know people like that. Maybe you aren't homeless, maybe you have a nice house, but there's nothing left because of sin, because of this, because of that, because of the other. If your life is falling apart, Jesus can remake you from the inside out. That's true, that's gospel. It's reality. Our God is the God who goes to the other side of the lake. Do you believe that? Right into the darkness, right into the graveyard, right into screwed up people like you and me, into the eeriness and the gross, disgusting, upside down nature of the dominion of darkness. That is where Jesus the King goes with his inbreaking kingdom, and he sets people free. This story happened, and this story happens all the time. and Jesus can and will do that. Freedom for you today. But if you are like the man, you think, okay, that's wow, that's amazing. But I mean, I don't relate to him by the grace of God. But if you're like the man at the end of the story, that's already happened. Jesus has already done a freeing work of you, and you're in your right mind, at least mostly, not always, but mostly. You're in your right mind. Then Jesus' word to you today is exactly the same as his word to the man all those years ago. Quote, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. I love that phrase, to your own people, your family, your friends, the neighbor kid down the street, the barista on Thursdays. This man is the first missionary in all of the scriptures. Technically, he's the second because Jesus is a missionary, but he doesn't count because he's awesome, all right? And notice that he's called to his own people. Is it me, or do we have the hardest time sharing the Jesus story with people that we know, right? I'm like the man in the story. I'm like, yes, we get all excited to follow Jesus across the lake to another culture and another language, to another country, to another place. I'm sure, absolutely, I'm in. Sign me up for 12 days every summer. I'm in for Jesus and his kingdom. But you put me in front of my neighbors. You put me in front of my friends who don't know Jesus. I'm scared to death. I mean, it's easy for me to stand up here on a Sunday and preach the gospel of Jesus. That's a walk in the park. 80% of you believe everything I'm saying. 90% of you think I'm weird, but you believe some of what I'm saying. 10% of you think I'm a quack, right? But most of you are, yeah, we're on the exact same page. Sure, it's easy for me to stand. It doesn't take courage at all. But you put me at a cocktail party at my neighbor's house, I'm scared to death. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were at, I should probably not tell you this, but we were at this crazy party. There's a ton of gay people in my neighborhood that we're friends with. We're at this party, and almost everybody there is a gay man, and it's a costume party, and a bunch of them are dressed up like women. and I'm there. And, you know, the bartender is in like a spandex mouse outfit, and I thought it was a woman, and then when we were walking home, my wife said, honey, that was a man. You put me there, and I love my neighbors, and I love to just be a gospel presence there, you know? You put me there in a conversation with a man wearing a dress and lipstick. So what do you do for a living? I work for a nonprofit. You know? That's a whole... It's scary. But those are my own people. It's my neighborhood. It's my city. I love my neighbors. I love my city. Those that know and follow Jesus, those that don't, those that want not, those that flat out reject Jesus. And that's where I'm called. I'm called into this city. But just like the story here, can you imagine this man is begging Jesus, I want to go back with you. I don't want to stay here in this graveyard, in this dark place, in this Decapolis, this dwelling place of demons and spirits. I want to go with you. What does Jesus say? No, I'm sorry. It's crazy, you know, to wrap up, all three characters ask Jesus a question or really make a request. The legion says, hey, let us go into the pigs. And Jesus says what? Okay, go ahead. The people say, Jesus, get out of here. We want nothing to do with you. And Jesus says what? Okay, sure, in the boat. The man says, Jesus, please, I want to be your disciple. And Jesus says what? Nope. What? You said yes to demons? And no to me? No, you are called to your own people. Who are your own people? Not people on the other side of the world. That's great. That's fantastic. But who are your own people? That you live by, that you do life with, that you bump into when you walk your dog, you get a cup of coffee from, you run into at the gym all the time. A cousin, a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a roommate from college, a coworker, a classmate in chem lab. Who are your own people? Is their face right now? Is their name? Holy Spirit, speak. That's who you're called to. And you're not called to do that for 12 days every July. You're called to do that 365. And don't underestimate. You think, I can't do that. Listen, this guy was a former sociopath. You can do it. But I don't know the Bible. Do you think this guy was well aware with the Torah and the... I doubt it. But I'm not mature. Well, you're better off than this guy, the odds are. And you know, it's easy to read the end of the story as failure, right? I mean, after all, the people reject Jesus. He goes to the Decapolis, and there's this dramatic thing, and then the people say, no, we want nothing to do with you. But it's not at all. In fact, if you keep reading Mark's story and you follow the storyline all the way through, it's interesting. Jesus goes back to the Decapolis a few chapters later, maybe a year later, we have no idea. And this time around, there is a sweeping move of God, and thousands of people come out to listen to Jesus' teaching and experience healing and rebirth and new life. And what happened in between visit 1 and visit 2? Well, we don't know, but the leading theory is that one guy who was turned upside down by Jesus, made right and made new, one guy goes back with the guts to tell his own people about Jesus. And that changed everything. Don't underestimate the power of Jesus and his story and what God's done in your life. I don't know, just tell people what God's done in your life. Can you do that? Tell people how many of you, God would agree with the statement, God's had mercy on me? Yeah, go tell people with specificity, with clarity, with honesty, with humility. Go tell people and don't underestimate what Jesus is up to. Let's pray.